here again. On low life. With not much life or battery. I had in the past few, I haven't done this a little bit over a month now, and in the past few days I had this kind of strong urge, like I need to do this again. And there's these like just kind of really annoying technical hurdles that kind of got in the way. Like I planned to come down here earlier today. I have a thing right after this. I don't know if I have time to like do this for as long as I normally do, or as long as I want to. I want to start doing it actually longer. And also, you know, the device wasn't turning on yesterday, and I was like, okay, it's dead. I plugged it in, left it in, I went to work, came back. The next day it just still wasn't turning on. Apparently it just was not charging. So today, like right before I was gonna leave, I had to like recharge it and then wait to come out here until later. And now it's at like 24%, and I have a portable charger that's also close to dead, so we're kind of relying on that. So that's the technical situation. And I notice when things like that happen, when it's something that I'm like caring about, and I like care about the outcome or the consequences of technical things that are kind of just over your head, going wrong, I notice I get so bothered by it, like way too bothered, probably for my own well-being. But in a way, I'm also aware that that state of being frustrated and bothered is just it's like a perfect platter of content to like source whatever I say in this video from, you know, like I can just use that, riff off that for a while. And it's like, I think I have been feeling recently like a strange relationship with this state of mind of being annoyed or frustrated, or feeling like you've wasted some good time just in this day or in this week or in this portion of your life even. And it's like I interact with that state of mind kind of knowing, kind of like having an understanding of where it fits in a little bit, rather than feeling like, you know, if you're frustrated or annoyed, you feel like you're wasting your time, that all that is a indicator of like that those things are completely true and there's nothing more to it. There's nothing, there's no virtue to being like that. And I guess you could argue like the virtue is that you are someone who has some sense of like the way that things should be. And so when you aren't living up to those standards of like the way you think you should be, it results in like a unpleasant state of mind, and that's kind of like incentivizes you to, you know, fix your shit and get out of it. But even that is like, I think there's actually more than that. There's more reason than that. Like I just don't really see how it's possible for me or for anyone to like adjust their lifestyle such that they never ever experienced this kind of sense of like, oh damn, like, you know, I could have been more fulfilled with my time on this day or anything like that. It kind of seems like an inevitable experience, you know? And so that creates this really weird like situation for me, because I don't I'm not always so certain of how to react to this. You know, in the past it would be, I would just react like well, I need to, you know, I need to like schedule out my time in a more disciplined way, and that'll solve the problem. But I don't think, I think the problem will just, if the problem is feeling like this, I think that'll always just arise in a different way, even if you change the original way. So like that's to say, it kind of seems like then I'm leaning towards the approach to things and whatever you do that there's no real like just total simple self-improvement. But I also don't believe that. Like I do get glimpses of like I know, just I can recognize like the hedonistic, like indulgent things that I do that result in me like feeling, not even emotionally, just like the state of my brain like just feels foggy, or it just feels like it's been overworked, and it feels like my like attention span capacity is just like slowly degrading, you know? And that's kind of an interesting thing, because it does lead me back to this kind of this simple approach of like, there is a kind of a correct way to do things and there's an incorrect one, and it's not like invariable between all people, but at a certain point each person kind of develops a sense of like the thing, like the habits that they have, you kind of develop a sense of like you can rank them from, you know, healthy to just completely unhealthy, generally. It seems like what makes you feel the most fulfilled, and you know, physically, emotionally, socially, intellectually, whatever it is, and what doesn't offer any of that, or just not enough of it. Like for me, it's like I notice that I don't divide my time amongst my interests equally, and I spend, I think, too much time devoted to like interests of mine that are just kind of like easily accessible, or easily to like get at very quickly. Like if I just play like a, you know, I can always have the option of like going on my phone or my computer and just playing like a super quick chess game, and that will give me some sort of like gratification or payoff, because it's like you know, you develop a little bit of like almost an addiction to it, and then you notice when you have that addiction, you tie a lot of like your value into your performance in that thing. like if I'm losing, I'm much more likely to feel like it's just a complete waste of time if I'm like on a losing streak than if I'm doing well and kind of crushing everyone. Then I'm like, you know, this is great. So there's also like it's kind of an ego thing. I just got a text from my neighbor that said, Ozzy is outside crying, can I let him in? Ozzy's my cat. Hold on. Let me take care of this. But even so far in this video, I feel like I'm like not at all communicating the things that, like the ideas that were floating around in my head that prompted this desire of like, oh my God, I need to go talk and walk. It's like this is how it always goes too. Like I always feel very strongly about like, I have these ideas, and it's like it's so much easier to just enjoy them myself and not have to like communicate them. But I also feel a desire to do that. Then when I get out here, it's like, I know I just started, but it's just, and I've said this, and every time I've done this, I think I've said this, it's really redundant. But it's the pattern. It's like I just don't feel like I'm able to communicate that. Like it takes so much drudgery and effort just to communicate this one like sliver of one of the minor ideas bouncing around in my head. Why is that? And so then I start to think of like, well, I was gonna say then I start to think maybe this is a waste of time. But that's actually not true. That's actually not true. I don't even start to think that. That's not true at all. That's like, I think it's like I've almost been conditioned for that to be like the way you follow up to that type of thought. But that's actually not true. Hold on. Doing this thing again. Wow. I don't know, I think I'm impatient. It's like I want this to be everything right away. And the fact that it's not really is so reflective of the way everything is and the way that my like emotional states of mind bounce around the way they are, you know. I don't feel like everything all the time. And so this experience, just the same, isn't everything all the time. And just more and more, I mean, I can't even begin to say these things without cringing at the kind of clichédness of them. But more and more it feels like there's nothing to rest on or cling on to. There's no like mental cushion to rest on. It's kind of just all equal in its relativeness, and but it's strange because I think like me and everyone else, we all kind of like, we love to make these like dramatic comments or like assessments of like the way that things are, you know? Like, yeah, well, I mean, there's this and there's just that, and you gotta just do this and you gotta just do that, and it's like none of that like stands true all of the time, you know? And like that qualification of it being not always true is never included in those statements. God damn.
But you're not giving me
This is a cool area. And it's so strange. It's like the things, the kind of palette of things that I consider the reasons why I'm like excited to just keep living and keep learning shit and doing things. They're all things that are most exciting or best interacted with not directly, like you can't I don't know, you can't like go up to them directly and, you know, tap on the door. It's like you have to like all these things that you find like intellectually stimulating. It's like you kind of have to like orbit around them, because if you try to like get right,
create an opportunity,
try to get right at them, it's like there's something missing a little bit. Like they're not really full. But even this, I don't really feel like, I don't feel this to be not true, but I also like, I don't feel strongly convicted about this right now. You know, like this is not something that is really on my head right now. It's kind of like a regurgitated idea from things that I've thought them and heard them, and I do believe them to be true. But right now, I don't really care about that. You know, I'm not really thinking about that right now. But what am I thinking about right now? Okay, I need to plug this portable in, and it's probably gonna die. This is probably gonna be a failed operation on a failed day. The whole day's a failure. Let's see if this even works. It's not even working. Okay, well, this is gonna be just part of a video, and this will be like side A, the wretchedness, the shittiness, the inability to develop a flow, the inability to feel like this is really fulfilling, and the recognition of how maybe it's not always very virtuous to like, you know, apprehend or anticipate shit like this forever. There's a lot of times that results in the actual thing not hitting. It doesn't hit. But I still, one thing I will say is that I never like, and this is actually kind of a development from how it used to be, I never feel like I 100% regret a thing. Like even this, I don't like regret doing this. Or even like, it would be easy to be like, oh, I regret maybe just the quality of this. Like I regret that it isn't as good. But that's just like, that's not true, you know? Like I don't. Because this is the way that it is, at least for me, so much of the time, like so much of the time, but also a tolerable amount of the time. I just like don't feel like I've got a flow going in my head, and I don't feel like fulfillment is this like easily achievable thing, you know? Because it's not, I mean, it's usually not, but in a way that kind of sets it up for when it is. I think, I hope, maybe I should stop talking. Okay, this is not working, so I'm just gonna wait. We're gonna walk it out, and we're gonna allow this to die. We're not even gonna try to do any life support on this video. We're just allow it to be, like, just let it be as terrible as it is, which is pretty terrible. Pretty terrible. You know, and I think I really am realizing that the way to do it is not to like plan things out in your head for like up to 2 or 3 days ahead of time, you know, because the experiences I've had that have just kind of come about spontaneously, and I'm not even like aware of their possibility 5 minutes before they start, those tend to kind of be the best, you know, because there's so much, I think it's understated how much of an effect it has when you think about something. You're like, okay, I'm gonna do this, especially when you frame it in your head like positively, like this is gonna be the shit, you know, like I'm gonna come downtown and I've got all these ideas flowing in my head, and I feel like I'm like alert and I'm on point recently, and I'll be able to just spill this kind of like profundity right into the damn device that doesn't even work, it turns out. And you come out here and you do that, and it's like it doesn't really even work at all, you know? But it's like you still gotta fill the time, so you find yourself like regurgitating these ideas that are just like bits and pieces of thoughts that you may have had or you may have heard, or both, but they aren't like close to your heart, or like what you really believe in that moment, you know? They're kind of just not really interesting, and you notice as you're saying them, you're a little bit critical of yourself saying them, and you're like frustrated with how it almost seems like you're like the version of yourself that is like visible to others is delayed so far behind, you know, like it's slugging along like miles behind the kind of more, what at times I might be tempted to call or refer to as like the more true self in my head. It's like it's so far behind, it seems like. And so you get frustrated with that, but you can't help this kind of split persona. You can't help because you need to be talking. You can't help keeping this up. It's really fucking crazy, actually. You just have to, like, you gotta keep going with it. And at some point you get a little bit fed up with that kind of, that self that lags so far behind. You get fed up with it kind of holding the reins, and you're like, all right, let's try to object to this a little bit more. And I think that's what's happened recently. Like, that's what's happened in the last few minutes. And I do actually feel, right as the thing's about to die, I do actually feel a little bit better about this. I noticed. Because I think I stopped refraining from, like, talking about the problem, you know? That's really the biggest, that's kind of the most terrible thing, is when you prevent yourself from, like, speaking about this. And that just enables it to just continue kind of indefinitely. You gotta, like, attack it a little bit. Like, if there's some way you're living that just doesn't feel right, it really seems to me like the worst thing you can do is to ignore it, or to tell yourself that, you know, there's something wrong, and, like, you're just approaching it in the wrong way. Because, like, you fucking know, like, you know which, like, you know what you're doing that isn't right. I like to believe, and I know that I'll probably watch this later and I'll listen to that sentence and just completely disagree with it, you know, because it's like, it's really, most of the time it's very complicated, and it's not like you just know. But I like to think that there are, like, glimpses, or there are mind states that are real, and, like, I do kind of experience where I do feel like I've got some idea of, like, right versus wrong as far as how I should proceed with my life. What's the right way to go? And I'm always, it's so funny, I'm always, like, multiple times a week, I notice myself, like, slipping back into complacency, or slipping back into, like, just doing, like, hedonistic shit and doing the easy things and not really pushing myself with anything. And then I notice myself almost, like, pretending to put a foot down, and I'm like, all right, from this point out, now I'm for real, you know? Like, from this point out, this is what I say, this point out, now I'm serious. And it's so, I mean, it seems ridiculous because a lot of times it doesn't actually mark any, like, real change. And I'll probably, I mean, what's been happening is that I have the experience of, like, putting my foot down, and then very quickly, like, within hours or minutes, I'll slowly kind of drift back into, like, complacency, and that will just build up to the point where it starts to feel like an issue. And then once it starts to feel like an issue, I'm like, okay, from now on, I'm gonna straighten shit out. I'm gonna, like, I'm gonna like tweak my lifestyle choices such that they're like in line with what I think is like the best way to go. I'm gonna tweak my mind such that it's like I experience like absolutely like minimal kind of like identity dissonance or anxiety about like who I am and how I'm manifesting and whether or not it's the way that I want to be, all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, I get this kind of like this surge of confidence of like there is a way to do this. And it's kind of like a great thing. But I've noticed recently when you fail to follow up on that stuff, it kind of degrades the quality of that surge of confidence, because the next time you get it, you're going to be like, well, how like totally inspired can I be by this if more often than not I just kind of don't make anything of this surge. And so that can bother me sometimes. And then it goes back to that original question that I think I started with of like, this is about to die, and I will pick up tomorrow most likely. Probably I'll come back here and pick up. That original question of like, is there something wrong about the way I'm doing this, or are these like recurrent feelings of like something's a little bit off, or I'm not like fully taking advantage of stuff? Is that just like how it is? Like, is that just natural? Is that just part of reality? Like you can't really avoid feeling sometimes like, you're missing something, or you can't grasp it all the way, or you're not doing all that you should to be the most everything, or whatever it is. Sometimes I believe it's just like you. And then it's back. It's back. About 4 days later, I'm continuing trying to decide which way to walk, in a completely different state now, like physically, a physical state, or like a different state, you know what I mean? And kind of just having been frustrated with not being able to finish the first part of this video when and where I was, and having to kind of postpone it and stitch these together, which might end up being cool anyway, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I've recently felt pretty good about things. Pretty kind of like inspired and motivated to push onwards and keep absorbing and doing and learning shit, which is actually a pretty good feeling, especially when it comes in wake of its absence, But I'm also like, I get hesitant to like claim that too much, like to claim that as how I am right now, like to claim that I am presently like motivated and whatever I said, motivated, inspired to learn and grow. But that is like something I know can like really kind of quickly slip away. And so I'm a little reluctant to like cozy all up next to it. So I'm aware from experience of how that can backfire on you. It can result in that feeling kind of just going away. But there's also a sense that there's something about this motivation that is like more deeply woven, or like more pervasive aspect of myself than what is subject to like constant fluctuation. Like, I don't think this will just pass so quickly, but it could. But I think what I'm hoping or assuming is that there's an element of it that will remain even through the kind of like natural mood swings. It's interesting, like sometimes I realize that it might just be like, it might be a day, or might usually just maybe a few hours, or not even. Sometimes I realize that for that past amount of time I haven't been thinking of things on these terms that I'm always thinking of them on, and I haven't been like maybe unconsciously like placing myself on a scale from fulfilled to unfulfilled, or stimulated to, you know, unstimulated, and apprehensive about the future or excited about it. And usually the things that are like factors in the states of mind when I'm more excited about it than apprehensive is about the future, that is that like I'm thinking of like things, you know, like I'm thinking of things that I have, or that I kind of like think that I have, that are reasons why I should be excited. And I notice I do that so much, even when I'm like in a mood that can be described as like unpleasant or really negative. I never feel completely like hollowed out, or that I have nothing, because even in those moods there's some sort of allure towards feeling that way. Maybe it's the knowledge from experience that like I have, that I like it will flip around and it will yield itself to its opposite, which is feeling kind of amazing. But I don't think that's all it is. I think it's like, I don't know. It's like I still am like clinging to have these kind of like solid frameworks. I can't believe I'm saying this, because it's such, to me it's so cliche, but I'm not sure. I don't know, another pattern I've really been kind of acutely aware of in me is, I may have spoken about this in the earlier part of the video, can't remember, is this like habit of getting kind of hit with this realization of potential, and almost feeling like a impatient urge, or like an antsiness to like get out there and get it all done, you know? It's like I need to get everything done. And it's like, I think I did say these exact words, but it's like putting my foot down and saying, from this point forward, like that, you know, no more lollygagging, lollygagging, whatever it is. Like, I am I'm serious about shit, you know? This is a big deal. And I'm gonna like harness all this, and I'm gonna like grab onto experience. But it's like, I noticed that usually pretty shortly following those moments of like that surge of ambition and motivation, like I said this exact same thing. Now I'm remembering. I fall back into like that. Like I lapse back into a state which prompts the whole surge to happen again, you know? You know, it's like if you really were true to your word or true to your pledge that you made when you have that surge, or you experience that surge of confidence and motivation, it wouldn't be something you have to experience twice, or at least you wouldn't have to experience it over and over and over again, because you would like correct the problems that led to its existence in the first place. It would be the idea. But I noticed that doesn't always happen. And then I'm a little confused about how to interpret that. Because on one hand, it's easy to say that, oh, it's because of the actions that I'm making, and there exist like other actions or other mindsets or other ways of going about everything that would result in me not having these moments of like these moments of realizing like I've been doing things a little bit off. You know, it's like if you don't do them off, then you won't have those moments. But on the other hand, I feel like there's something just about the nature of nature of everything that it's like it's actually difficult maybe for me to avoid having those altogether. Like I can't just never have a moment like that again. And not just because it's healthy to have it, but just because like sometimes it feels like there isn't like a foolproof approach to things that will result in the termination of that experience, you know, like permanently. Like there's nothing that can make it so that experience goes away and never comes back or never appears. Kind of seems like an inherent part of life, but also it's tricky to say that because for one reason I haven't had this pattern going on for too long, and because I haven't heard it expressed by a ton of other people. And so to say that something as broad as it's an inherent part of life, for those two reasons, it feels like a little, I don't want to be too quick to say that. But it's like, yeah, even this, it's like I'm just kind of perfectly willing to drop this whole subject. And it's almost, if I'm being honest, it's almost just something that I like have gone on this long talking about, which is only a few minutes, but you know, nonetheless, because I still don't really know how to express the more subtle truths that feel, you know, more potent and more relevant. I still haven't really figured out how to verbalize that stuff. And it could be of whatever frameworks I'm holding up, or rubrics I'm like holding myself in line with that I'm not even aware of. And I just maybe it'd take a lot of conscious effort to release that bind on myself and just like let myself rock in a sense. But then I think sometimes that would be like too free flowing. But I think I'm more attracted to that right now. to just kind of like spewing random things that don't really follow from one point to the next. But it's actually kind of difficult to do that, and not just to be okay with it and to feel like it's good enough to continue, but just to even come up with those things, or to let your kind of guard down and allow yourself to do that is really kind of hard. And so, as a result of that difficulty, I'm just continuing to like say things that follow after another, and you can kind of trace them back to like a certain moment where, like, the kind of origin point where I started talking about like how the previous tangent, kind of like an admission or a confession that the previous tangent wasn't actually something that I was deeply and to the most trueness like interested in or felt the deepest. And then I started to like posit that maybe the way around that uncomfortable repetitive experience of realizing pretty far after, or saying pretty far after I've started the story, that what I've been saying isn't actually like a something that feels deeply real and meaningful to me, or at least in this moment it doesn't. Maybe it used to, but that it's like a little bit like a stale, dried up, washed up thought, and that doesn't feel really fulfilling to only echo those. And so as a result, I kind of posited, like, what if I, instead of doing that, what if I instead just kind of spoke randomness and tried my best to emulate what's going on in my head, like, at this moment, by like directly saying like bits and pieces of things that almost sound like it's like some like new age like spoken word or something, where I'm just kind of saying things that don't really seem to relate to one another. And the whole message is that like our true internal state doesn't really make too much sense and isn't really like something that you could package up and distribute or present to like people that aren't you, or even to yourself, without a lot of self-criticism being subjected upon you. But like, even that feels almost like a washed up idea that I'm not very much fully in love with. But I guess it would be kind of consistent with this whole mode that I'm going on, to report that I do feel like a certain sense of satisfaction or like joy in this kind of process of like talking about my words and my thoughts so closely and analyzing them so closely, and like doing, immediately following like the completion of a thought, like doing a recap of it, and for like the self and other to like be able to experience that again, and just for the kind of invigoration of like doing the mental work of recapping exactly what I just said, which was maybe like a long, complicated sentence or paragraph, and being able to like having that opportunity to think again about what it is that all means, and because it's really difficult to just kind of on autopilot do a recap of something like that. I don't think that would really be like something I could do, because it's like it requires, like, I gotta actually remember what it was I was talking about. And so there's a certain level of like conscious awareness that is required to do that accurately, and a byproduct of that conscious awareness required is that I'm like thinking about it and judging and evaluating it. And I think one of the factors in my satisfaction with that is that my judgment and evaluation of it leaned in like quite a positive direction, and I felt almost like this is maybe the type of thing that I've been missing a little bit, and could be one of the like approaches to this exercise that that make it feel like consistently much more fulfilling. And it's especially pertinent in the wake of like the fact that, you know, the past like several times I've done this, I've felt and even said how I feel like it's very difficult for me to get a flow going. And instead of really like radically attacking the problem and radically adjusting my ways, I kind of I think I'm realizing now I used a single experience of or the memory of a single experience of like only after an hour had elapsed developing any sort of like semblance to a flow. And I used that and kind of extrapolated it outward to say that that is like a consistent thing without saying that, but I thought that, I think, or maybe I didn't really think that, but on some level that thought like crossed my subconscious or whatever level of consciousness it was. And I thought that, and so I then refrained from, like I said, I refrained from drastically altering my approach to the exercise in the face of my dissatisfaction with it, because I relied on this idea that after a certain amount of time had elapsed, maybe not suddenly or abruptly, but maybe in a more gradual or subtle way, I would feel more okay with what I was doing, and more like in some sort of flow state. And so I would lean back on that rather than adjusting the way I was doing things then in that moment. And my point being that just now I've kind of come across an approach to this exercise that makes it feel worthwhile before having waited that amount of time. So it's kind of like dispelling that myth that this amount of time has to have elapsed for you to be really warmed up. And also there's a satisfaction at kind of this revelation, I guess I can call it a revelation, clears up a little bit some of the dissonance or discomfort I experienced in that moment, and that I remember experiencing when I said things out loud on camera, and, you know, by default or necessarily thought them a little bit, when I said that kind of that whole rhetoric or reasoning of, oh, the reason why I'm not feeling this so much is that not enough time has elapsed, and once it does, at that point I will kind of, maybe not magically, but notice a really pretty drastic shift in my satisfaction with this. And I can remember now, and I'm less reluctant to identify now, the fact that I didn't actually believe that fully when I thought it on whatever level I thought it on, and when I said it, there was a little bit of like an additional layer of dissonance, discomfort, or dissatisfaction added kind of on top of the dissatisfaction that I got from just not being in a flow state to begin with. And when I justify it incorrectly, and when I kind of know that my justification of it is incorrect, and yet I don't correct that, and I don't acknowledge that either out loud or in my head, then of course there's like a bit of dissonance and dissatisfaction. And I actually think it's the truth that I was naive and I wasn't aware of the cause of that dissatisfaction. And so now my whole point being is I'm experiencing like a kind of level of almost like a thrill in realizing that there is, or what at least appears to be right now, a reason to explain those kind of hours of dissatisfaction. And that reason being that my approach to the exercise was just far too limited and far too almost elementary, and it wasn't it didn't have kind of included in it enough layers of thought or language. And so it was kind of like a flat Stanley type of thing, like I was just speaking on this flat terrain and like kind of perforating sideways on it, but never really moving upwards. So it's just like this horizontal kind of like experience. But even that is like a little bit of like a backlash or a sense of cringe at saying something like that, because that is something that I've heard and didn't really like originate from me per se. But then I also think like, you know, what really did originate from me. And there's also a little bit of there's like a little bit of dissatisfaction or a reaction of that like accuses my 10 seconds ago self of committing an act of cringiness by like spewing such a kind of what is within certain circles a cliche of, you know, what does originate from me. And also another reason is not just that I perceive it to be a cliche, but also because I don't feel particularly interested in addressing that question right now, and I don't feel particularly like equipped to address it, even if I was interested. I don't really feel like I could address it without kind of, you know, just tossing a bunch of question marks at that subject. And so there was like a little bit of like a little pinch or like a little bit of a jab of guilt or like unpleasantness when I brought something up like that, because it's like it kind of feels like I shouldn't really be bringing into this already complicated picture things that I don't really feel are necessary, and then they feel a little bit additive. And I might even say that they feel like a little bit horizontal in a way, which of course is just kind of me making fun of myself saying that earlier. But there's a little bit of like a stiffness to what you might call that joke that makes it, you know, makes me like aware of its kind of limitedness in kind of impact and effect, but also noticing that at some point I've ended up here having been delivered by like a tangent, like an extremely long tangent from kind of the main train of what I was saying. And I think if I kind of recall back, the main train was that I feel a little more satisfied with my current approach to I'm gonna go down by the rocks actually. My current approach to this topic to this exercise, and I'm also realizing that maybe I've gained some ground as far as feeling okay about this, but I don't actually have much leeway or much time to sit in complacency and allow myself to just like absorb those semi-good feelings. Not that it would be impossible to do so, but that anticipating that if I did choose to do so, I would kind of be almost brought back down to like level ground, and I would have to figure out another way to elevate myself above this sense of being at the base, as far as like fulfillment and unfulfillment are relating to one another and interacting. And so for that reason, I'm kind of pressuring myself internally to like continue speaking, and not only continue speaking, but to continue speaking in a way that is like self-reflexive and analyzes pretty closely all of the things that I'm saying, and leaves no room for like the absence of transparency to like kind of set up camp here. But I'm noticing even now that like my thoughts and my speech are slowing a bit, and maybe there's just like a natural and thus acceptable exhaustion that is coming on, but I don't even really feel content with accepting that as the reality. And I think part of the problem right now is that I'm a little bit bothered by the intensity of the sun right now, but also kind of having this sense that I want to avoid kind of blithe, casual remarks like that, because I mean maybe that's a harsh or extreme way of categorizing them, but in a way that's how they feel, because they're very much like flat remarks that can't really be expounded upon, or if they can, it would require a lot of like almost what feels like unnecessary effort, and a lot of like quote unquote reaching to really get much substance or depth out of like a remark like that. But right now I am still like, despite this kind of brief dip, or this brief period of like struggle following this kind of tremendous elation or revelation, I am right now feeling still generally pretty satisfied with what I've done so far. And I had like a brief thought of like, perhaps it's like somehow a mistake to admit as much while I'm still in the midst of this activity. But then I don't know. That one's still pending. I almost said that I dismissed that as too like caustic or too swift to reject something like that. But I mean, ultimately I don't think there's really much of a problem with like verbalizing how I feel like mostly good with this, if that decision to do so serves only as a motivator to continue on that same route, rather than like an indulgent piece of like thought candy that I can just kind of like suck on and like use as like a way of like hiding from this sort of maybe like what I might perceive to be like the oncoming like voidness of falling back down that hill that I've just kind of triumphantly climbed up. And so, to kind of like blunt that fall a bit, I might be it might be natural to bite onto that thought candy, which would come in the form of the thought that I feel good with what I've done so far. But at the same time, it isn't untrue. Like, what that thought candy, if we're calling it that, is claiming isn't at all untrue, and it's actually feels kind of deeply true, or maybe not deeply true, but it feels not wrong to me. And so I'm gonna like accept it and do my best to move past with it in its current kind of less than like decisive standing. I'm just kind of gonna leave that as is, and proclaim that it's okay as it is. But even now I'm noticing that I'm slowing down a bit, and just in the past few seconds I've had the thought that maybe there's a little bit of a naive kind of brashness to my necessitating that I must like continue at like such a consistent and high speed as I started with, and that it might actually feel no less fulfilling to allow myself to slow down naturally as my body takes a break and slows down. And it might be true that that's the case, and I think I do feel like almost a bit of pride in having voiced this like counter opinion, this objection so quickly after I notice its origination in my mind. It's like it forms, and I like immediately kind of grab it and pull it to the forefront of my head and then speak it aloud. And then once I've done that, it's almost like I at least like to think the impact that it has so quickly following its birth is like made more significant, or is much larger when I say it out loud than if I had just thought about it or allowed it to kind of like slowly manifest into a noticeable thought. Because I think I'm right now much more aware and much more diligent about like recruiting thoughts, and like I'm a little bit like on the prowl for thoughts that I can like integrate into this whole kind of mixing pot and use them as like an additive complicator to this whole thing, use them as another thing that will like add another level of depth, which I'm like right now very married to, or very in line with, because I've just kind of in a pretty like confident way have concluded that this depth is kind of just the thing that I need right now, or just the thing that I've needed the past half dozen times I've done this activity, and can almost be pinpointed as the thing, which is like close to solely responsible for whatever lack of fulfillment I perceived in those things, in those half dozen past instances of doing this activity. But also I'm kind of a little bit glad that I finally got through that last thought, because while I was having that thought, I noticed myself developing this eagerness, which is also in line with the whole thought police, thought patrol thing that I've got going on right now, much more so than I normally do. And this eagerness was an eagerness to also apply to that thought the qualification of like, yes, it does kind of seem like this depth or these additional layers are something that can be pinpointed as like an explanation for like a lack of fulfillment in the past, but it's also like just from kind of feeling like I have a sense of how this type of stuff works. I'm also like super hesitant, or part of me is super hesitant, that thought, which I'm like identifying as almost like separate from me, that thought was super hesitant to accept that it's just this single factor that is responsible for like a lack of fulfillment in the past. Because I kind of know, or I think I know, that those are the type of claims or thoughts that tend not to hold true and actually supply like the best evidence for why for why it ain't that simple. But I'm just kind of, there's like a bit of a non-urgency, or like a casualness with which I'm like applying that disclaimer being that it's not tends not to be like the thing that lasts the longest to claim just one thing as the reason for like a phenomena like that. It tends not to hold true for too long. But I'm not very urgent about like communicating that to even myself or to anyone, because I don't really suspect myself of having been so like deeply attached to this notion that I can blame like a lack of prior fulfillment on one thing. And so because I don't suspect myself of that, it's like I'm not, this other part of myself that is coming up with this disclaimer isn't very urgent, because it senses that the big self won't really be hurt if he like, or if it realizes that there's more than just this thing. But even just that, I'm sure it was like, I noticed it internally and externally kind of lost traction towards the end. And again, there's kind of this back and forth in my head over whether or not that's something that's like okay, or whether I need to like whether that is something that is just natural and actually is in my best interest, or is in this, whatever this activity is in its best interest to just let it kind of fall and let it fluctuate in its levels of intensity and energy invested. So that's like one approach, and then the other is that kind of is like just like a complacent viewpoint that will result in me like rolling back down the hill and into a state of not really feeling great about this, because what I'm now identifying as like a lack of layers to it. And I guess if I was kind of like made to choose one of these two like opposing viewpoints, I would choose the one that claims that you gotta be like hardcore all the time, because I'm noticing right now that I'm starting to feel less like invigorated, or less like I've got some sort of like adrenaline rush from doing this, in more like uncomfortable with it in kind of subtle ways. And I think I'm tempted to think that it isn't much of a coincidence that is happening at the same time as the lowering of intensity. But also, I don't really believe that either. And now I'm like, I took just half a second to like look without speaking, or look without thinking about what I'm going to speak about next, and feeling like kind of what felt at the time like an overwhelming desire to just like stop trying to keep this up, only 43 minutes in and I'm to this part, and I'm like already kind of ready to not be keeping this up anymore. And it's almost like there's like a bit of a panic within like the subsets of my brain, because they don't really know how to like deal with this, and there's like a lot of like layers of self that are kind of like arguing with one another right now, and I can kind of feel, and I'm not really sure, it's like, what if there's always that thought of, now I'm like, after kind of pushing myself with that surge of like movement and speaking and thinking all very quickly, now I'm like tempted to, I'm just kind of like lulled into like the stillness of this like through the stillness of this setting, I'm like almost feel myself being lulled into like passivity. Like I just kind of I want to kind of just like lay down, and I just want to like observe this kind of what I guess is a gorgeous landscape, but it's almost like my denoting it as gorgeous is more of like a habitual or observationally learned thing, rather than me feeling it right now. And it's not to say that I don't believe this is not, like I don't believe that this is not gorgeous, but when me saying that, it's like I kind of say that as like almost like a default, before having taken the time or energy out to like observe it on my own, and then deciding that like, yeah, this is gorgeous. But I do feel like now I'm recognizing like a little bit of satisfaction in what I perceive to be like a very like kind of surgical way of analyzing that last idea that I floated, and like kind of just immediately like confessing its less than trueness. And it's like, of course you could be like, oh, all these thoughts are somehow less than true, but like that one was especially so in that I kind of felt right away that there was something off, rather than after like close consideration I felt that maybe there's slightly something off. And so like there's a certain level of pride in like my ability to just like attack that right away and confess its kind of, like I said, it's less than trueness. But now I do kind of like have to admit that I'm like feel a sense of running out of steam, and now more than ever I'm sensing that that's kind of like, it has to be okay. And after just thinking about it for a few seconds, I think this, I'm not entirely sure about this yet, or maybe I won't be after saying it, but I think that maybe the reason for my not feeling so great about this portion of the video, like these in this setting, is that the majority of it has been spent like reflecting on this kind of like surge of like energy and depth and complexity that happened before I got here. And so, you know, it really feels difficult. This is like, can be kind of an analogy for so much, but it feels difficult to refrain from like clinging on to those, to something as like good and invigorating as that, you know? And then you realize when you do that, you notice like your kind of experience of like where you are, or your even just your mood in your head is like, it's kind of like slipping gradually, because you're, you know, more and more as like the minutes pass, you're like clinging on to like a dead, like past thing that is losing relevancy every minute. And so then it might be the temptation to conclude like, oh, I need to you know, like of course that's the case, and the kind of way of dealing with what might be a problem in that is to like, you know, accept like the marching forwardness of all this, of everything, and accept the fact that you need to just kind of like you need to like just be glad that these like good experiences existed in the first place, and to kind of feel them while they're there, and not feel this kind of like disappointment when they're past. But it also so often it feels to me that like this kind of this like disillusionment or this sadness or disappointment of like a period of goodness, however long it may have been, or like something good passing on, it feels to me that a lot of that is just like a natural or like inherent result of like the fact that you enjoyed it in the first place, you know? Like it seems, and maybe it's because I just have not practiced or tried hard enough, and then it just, when I use lingo like that, it just sounds like it's like some, like life is like just like a strategy game or something. But I mean, whatever with that. I'm gonna say it again, it feels like I haven't practiced or tried hard enough, and that maybe if I did, I would be able to like you know, experience the goodness of things fully while they're here, while also afterwards not feeling so kind of devastated or even disappointed by their absence. But because I haven't practiced or tried hard enough with that, all I really know is that it feels a little I don't know. I mean, I'm losing my train of thought. I mean, I'm really like, there's like a flash of energy and then it kind of faded. I don't know if like, I think my point was that because I haven't, I mean, I'm using the term because I haven't practiced or tried hard enough to like experience the goodness of something fully, and then, you know, without being disappointed by its leaving, I kind of sense that it isn't really possible to do that. And you know, if you are going to like relish in the goodness of something, there kind of necessarily will be some period of grief following its absence. And it sounds pretty, I guess, straightforward. So I guess I'm saying that because I'm wondering why I'm doubting, but I don't know. I'm not even doubting it. And here is the point. We've kind of reached the point where the things I'm saying, it might not always sound like it, but like they're kind of they originate from like points of much less conviction. I mean, that might even not be the right term. I'm much less convicted about these points that I'm making, and I think that's just like coming from a tiredness from having been no, convicted is wrong. What? I don't know. Whatever. They're both right and they're both wrong, and either of them are. You know what I'm saying? Kind of walking on slippery rock here. Hold on. Yeah, I'm debating now that if it might actually make the most sense to just stop this right now. And feeling a little, like, just a little disappointed with how the kind of, or a little annoyed with how the surge of energy and like fulfillment didn't really last too long, and it kind of like pooped itself out pretty relatively quickly. But also still like pretty fucking like glad that I did have that in the first place, because it's like now I feel, I at least would like to think that I have a better idea of how to like attack the good stuff right away next time I do this, rather than kind of like mull about in like mediocrity and like I don't know, because that's really that's kind of what it's been all the time. And I guess I am okay at like just, I try to salvage it by like having that approach of like taking it for what it is and refraining from like eliminating or erasing everything that isn't like perfect or up to the like the highest quality that you can imagine, because I don't think that's really the way to go. But that also might be a way of, that might be in a sense like, it's kind of me, like now I'm thinking it could be just me like justifying not really finding a solution to why it's not usually fulfilling. And today it's like maybe I can say that I actually tried to do something different and figure out why this wasn't always hitting. But I don't really remember consciously doing that, like thinking that, okay, this is often bad, and how can I fix that? But now I'm thinking that I did have some thoughts of like an agency directing me in the way that I went, and that agency having a lot of concern for like preventing this instance from repeating the kind of less than greatness of the last few. I think it might make sense to stop it here. Look at all this.